There is a kitchen somewhere in Gary, Indiana, in the autumn of 1954, and a man is standing at the back door in his work boots with the soot of the open hearth furnace still in the lines around his eyes, and his wife is handing him a tin cup of coffee, and on the windowsill behind her, there is a mason jar with 72 cents in it that she has been saving since June for the Christmas tree. He came home with $12.40 in his pocket, and not one penny of it belonged to anybody else. Before we go any further, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you grew up, because I want to know if your grandfather lived this way too. You sit with old men long enough at a diner counter, you start to hear the same sentences come out of all of them. They will tell you about the cold cellar, the rain barrel, the smokehouse out behind the garage, the chickens in the side yard, and somewhere in the middle of it, if they trust you, they will lean a little closer and tell you about the still. Their uncle ran in the woods behind the church. Then they will get quiet and they will look down at their coffee and they will say something like, "You cannot do any of that anymore." The funny thing, the thing that puts a knot right behind your collarbone when you really sit with it, is that none of those tricks ever stopped working. Somebody just took them away from us one at a time, while everybody was busy looking somewhere else. Number 25. The chickens in the side yard. There was a moment in this country, around the spring of 1943, when the federal government was begging American families to keep hens, with posters in every post office. By the early 1950s, almost every working family from Pittsburgh to Youngstown to Gary had 4 or 5 birds clucking around the back fence, and your grandmother could tell you the name of every one of them. The EGGS came warm at 6 in the morning, and they tasted like something you have probably forgotten what EGGS are supposed to taste like. Then the suburbs went up, and the lawns out there had to look like the cover of a magazine. The Pacific Legal Foundation has documented that by the 1970s, most suburban towns had banned the very same chickens the government had begged families to keep 30 years before. Number 24. The cellar. He dug himself, 8 feet down into the side of a hill behind the house, lined with fieldstone, packed with apples and carrots and the long row of jars your grandmother put up in August. 38 degrees in there year-round, no compressor humming, no monthly bill in the mailbox. He dug it himself with a shovel and a brother-in-law who owed him a favor, and not one human being on the face of the earth ever told him he needed permission to put a hole in his own ground to store his own food. Try that today, and the permits cost more than the cellar. Number 23. The seeds in the paper bag. Every September, on a Saturday morning when the air had just turned, your grandfather walked the length of the garden with a small brown sack and picked the seeds out of the ripest tomatoes, the fattest beans, and the corn that grew tallest. The next spring he planted them, and they came up exactly the same plant his father had planted before him. Then, in 1970, the Plant Variety Protection Act came in, and over the next 40 years, the small regional seed houses got bought up one at a time until just a handful of corporations controlled most of what you can buy at the garden center. The hybrids they sell you now do not breed true. He never had that problem. Number 22. The hog in November. The first cold snap would come in around the 3rd week of the month. The whole neighborhood gathered in your grandfather's backyard before the sun was up. A 250-pound pig became hams, bacon, sausage, lard, and head cheese before sundown. The men did the heavy work. The women rendered the fat in great iron pots. The children ran scraps to the smokehouse and brought back cold biscuits. Nothing was wasted. By the late 1960s, town after town was passing ordinances against backyard slaughter. The same inspectors who were supposed to be checking the big packing plants somehow never seemed to find the time. Number 21. The lard in the white crock. This is the one that makes the old men look away, because their wives are gone now, and the biscuits are gone with them. Your grandmother kept a tall white crock of pure rendered lard on the back of the cook stove. Her biscuits flaked apart in your hand on a Sunday morning, and her pie crust was something you can still taste 40 years later when you close your eyes. Then, a company called Procter & Gamble launched something called Crisco in 1911. They hired home economists, they donated cookbooks to the church basement, and they spent 4 solid decades convincing American women that the white grease in the can was clean and modern, and that the lard in the crock was old-fashioned and dirty. They forgot to mention one small thing. Their hydrogenated oil was full of trans fats. The FDA finally had to step in, and the final determination on file at the Federal Register, dated June 16, 2015, ruled that partially hydrogenated oils are no longer recognized as safe for human food. Your grandmother was right the whole time. It just took 90 years for somebody to admit it. Number 20. The milk in the glass jar. He gave it to his children warm and foamy in the summer of 1953, and not one of those children ever got sick, because he could see the cow with his own 2 eyes, and he knew the man who milked her, and the milk went from the cow to his kitchen in less than an hour and a half. In 1987, the Food and Drug Administration published a regulation entitled 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 1240.61, and the interstate sale of raw milk was banned across the country. Your grandfather just walked over with a jar. Number 19. The smokehouse out back. A small wooden shed behind the garage, hickory smoke curling out of the chimney for 3 solid days, hams hanging from iron hooks, bacon slabs turning the color of an old copper penny. That meat sat on a shelf in the pantry for a year without a refrigerator, and it tasted like nothing you can buy on a styrofoam tray. The technique is technically still legal for your own family on your own land, but the building permits, the fire codes, and the language the health department uses about home-smoked meat being a prohibited food, all of it stacks up on the kitchen table until most working people give up before they ever start. Number 18. The basket in the public woods. There was a time, all the way through the early 1950s, when families up in Appalachia and down in the Ozarks walked into the National Forest in spring with a basket and came back at sundown with ramps and morels and pawpaws and hickory nuts and blackberries enough to fill a Sunday table for 9 people. That was supper. That was free. That was a thing you and your grandmother did together when you were 6 years old, and she taught you which mushroom was the good one. That knowledge only ever passes from one set of hands to another, and it does not exist in any book in any library in this country. Then the regulations came in, and the enforcement swept up the 78-year-old grandmother who had been picking those same berries on those same hills since Calvin Coolidge was in the White House. Number 17. The Christmas Club Passbook. Every January, on the first Friday after the new year began, your grandfather walked down to the savings and loan and handed the woman behind the counter 2 crisp dollar bills, and she stamped his little blue passbook, and that was Christmas. $2 a Friday for 52 Fridays, and on the 1st of December, a check arrived in the mailbox for $104, and that was the tree and the turkey and the children's shoes, and a little something soft for his wife wrapped in tissue paper. The first Christmas club in this country was opened in 1909 at the Carlisle Trust Company in Pennsylvania by a man named Merkel Landis, and by the early 1980s, 23 million Americans were saving $6 billion every year through that simple little passbook system. Then the credit card industry came along in February of 1950, when a businessman named Frank McNamara paid his dinner bill at a restaurant in New York with a piece of cardboard. And over the next 40 years, that cardboard square took every single one of those Christmas clubs apart at the seams. Number 16. The two hives in the corner of the garden. He built the boxes himself out of pine boards and tin roofing on a Saturday afternoon, and in September, he pulled the supers and spun the honey into mason jars and sold the extra at a folding table by the road for 50 cents a jar. There was no paperwork. Today, almost 1/3 of the managed honeybee colonies in this country have been lost every single year since 2006. And the cities that ought to be doing everything to bring beekeepers back have piled on so many requirements, forms, and fees that most of the people who would have started a hive in the spring give up before the first warm Saturday in May. Number 15. The hand-dug well behind the kitchen. He went down into the earth with a pickaxe and a galvanized bucket, his brother holding the rope, and he came up with cold, clean water at 22 feet. His family drank from that well for 43 winters, and not once in all those years did a water bill arrive in the mailbox. Now, think about the lobbying that the drilling companies did in the 1950s and the 1960s to get state laws written that required licensed contractors for any new well. And think about how convenient it was that the only people who could legally make a hole in your own backyard were the same people who charged $7,000 to do it. Number 14. The wood gas in the barrel. This sounds like a story somebody made up. It is not a story. During the second great rationing on the European continent, hundreds of thousands of farm trucks ran on a gas you make by burning wood chips in a sealed barrel and feeding the smoke straight into the engine. In March of 1989, the Federal Emergency Management Agency itself published a step-by-step manual on how to build one from a galvanized garbage can and a small metal drum. The document number is EMW 84E1737, and you can still download it tonight from the Department of Energy Public Archive. Your grandfather may not have built one, but he knew somebody who could. Number 13. The herb garden by the kitchen window. Elderberry syrup for a chest cold in February. Yarrow leaf pressed onto the cut on the boy's hand after he caught it on the barbed wire fence. Plantain. That flat, wide weed everybody pulls out of the lawn, chewed up and pressed onto a bee sting on a hot July afternoon. Chamomile tea when the baby could not settle in the night. None of that was magic. After the Flexner Report came out in 1910, funded by the Carnegie and the Rockefeller Foundations, the medical schools that taught any of this were shut down one by one, and the knowledge that used to live in every farmhouse kitchen got pushed out into the dark and forgotten. Number 12. The house he raised in a single season. 20 men showed up in his side yard on a Saturday morning in May, and the women cooked all day at 3 different stoves up and down the block, and the children carried water and nails, and by Sunday afternoon, the frame was up and the roof was on. By the end of the next month, the young couple had a porch to sit on in the evenings, and they had paid for the lumber and almost nothing else. Try that today, and the owner-builder permits that exist on paper come wrapped in so much red tape that most working men give up before they ever buy the first stack of 2x4s. Number 11. The still in the woods behind the church. Step carefully here because this one is still on the books in most of the country. Federal Law 26 United States Code Section 5601 makes it a felony to possess an unregistered still, with penalties up to 5 years in federal prison and a $10,000 fine for each separate violation. That law has been on the books in some form for 158 years, all the way back to 1868, until April 10th of this year, when the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, in an opinion written by Judge Edith Jones in a case called McNutt versus the United States, ruled that the home distilling ban is unconstitutional. Your grandfather, in 1954, knew 6 men in his county who ran a small still in the back of a barn behind a hayfield. They made apple brandy that would put hair on a Buick, and he never paid one single dime in liquor tax in the whole of his working life. Number 10. The trap line in November. He set it on a Sunday afternoon when the first hard frost came. He ran it before sunrise every morning for 3 weeks, and he came home with mink, muskrat, beaver, and rabbits. The meat went into the stew pot on Sunday, and the pelts went into a burlap sack. At the end of the month, he carried that sack down to the fur house in town and came back with enough cash for a sack of flour, a sack of sugar, a tin of coffee, and a new pair of boots for the boy. The Pittman-Robertson Act of 1937 and the Lacey Act, amended 5 separate times since the year 1900, slowly built a wall of licenses and tags and permits around what used to just be supper. Number 9. The coal in the cellar bin. October came around and the coal truck pulled up at the curb on a Friday morning. The man on the back of the truck tipped 1.5 tons of black anthracite through the basement window into the wooden bin. That coal heated the whole house through the worst Pennsylvania winter for less than what you pay for one single month of natural gas today. Your grandfather got up at 4 in the morning every Sunday and banked the fire, so the house was warm when his wife came down at 6 to start the bacon. The men who knew how to bank a coal fire so it held its heat through a 14-hour winter night mostly took that knowledge to the grave. Number 8. The layaway tag at the corner store. He could not afford the new washing machine in one paycheck because nobody could, and so the man behind the counter wrote his name on a paper tag, tied it to the handle of the machine, put it in the back room, and held it for him while he paid $5 every Friday for 30 Fridays. No interest, no credit check, just a handshake and a promise. The Diners Club card came out in 1950. Bank AmeriCard followed in 1958. Over the next 30 years, the credit card slowly killed every layaway plan in every department store in America. He paid cash on a handshake. You pay interest on a screen. Number 7. The walk to the mill gate. He lived 1.5 miles from the gate of the open hearth, and for 31 years of his working life, he walked there in the dark, and he walked home in the dark, lunch pail in one hand, thermos of coffee in the other, and he never owned a car payment in his life. The Federal Aid Highway Act was not signed by President Eisenhower until 1956. After that, slowly, everything in this country started to spread out, and the working man who used to walk to his job had to buy a car, and then a second car when his wife had to go to work too, and the car payment became as permanent as the rent. Number 6. The garden out the back door. In the summer of 1944, Victory Gardens grew almost 42% of all the fresh vegetables eaten in the entire United States. 42%. Read that number twice. He kept his going right through the 1950s because the habit was already in his hands. Tomatoes climbing up against the south fence in August, pole beans on the chicken wire, a row of sweet corn down the middle for the boy. He did not call it a hobby, he called it Tuesday. Number 5. The screwdriver in the drawer. Take a breath here because this is the one that hits the men who used to fix everything they owned. He fixed it all. The radio that quit in the middle of the World Series. The washing machine that started whining in March. The lawnmower that would not start on the first warm Saturday in April. There was a man on every block who could solder a connection on a tube radio, and Heathkit, founded in 1947, sold him the parts in a cardboard box, and he soldered together his own television set in the cellar over the winter. Today, the manufacturers glue the cases shut and lock the software with code that the law itself protects, and they call you a thief if you so much as try to fix what you already paid for. The Federal Trade Commission finally put out a report on this whole quiet swindle in May of 2021. He never needed a movement. He had a screwdriver and a Sunday afternoon. Number 4. The quarter of every paycheck. The Bureau of Economic Analysis at the Department of Commerce keeps a running record of this. In the 1950s, the average American working family was setting aside between 9 and 11 cents out of every single dollar that came through the front door. That number today, after 15 years of near-zero interest rates and an entire economy built on borrowing instead of saving, is down to around 3 or 4 cents on the dollar. He saved out of habit because his father had saved out of necessity. We borrow out of habit because we have forgotten there ever was another way. Number 3. The favor between neighbors. The mechanic on the corner fixed the carpenter's truck on a Saturday afternoon. The carpenter built the mechanic a new front porch the following spring. The plumber unstuck the butcher's drain on a Wednesday, and the butcher dropped off a Sunday roast every other month for a year. Not 1 penny of cash ever changed hands between any of them. Today, the Internal Revenue Service has a whole topic on its website, topic number 420, that says barter is taxable income at fair market value. You are supposed to file Form 1099B for the exchanges you make with the man who lives across the street from you. He never knew that. He just helped a friend who had once helped him. Number 2. The deed on the dining room wall. In 1950, a steel worker in Gary, Pittsburgh, or Youngstown, brought home somewhere in the neighborhood of $4,000 a year. A modest 2-story frame house with a front porch, a backyard, and a 1-car garage cost him about $8,000. 2 years of his wages bought a roof that sheltered his family for the rest of his natural life. By the time he was 48, he held the deed in his hand, paid in full. He framed it and hung it on the wall of the dining room, above the table where his grandchildren would later eat their first solid meals. The median house in this country today costs about 7 times what the median worker takes home in a single year. The math is just not the same math that his math was. And now, number 1. This is not a single trick like the other 24. This is the thread that holds every single one of them together. Your grandfather in his small white frame house with the chickens out back and the rain barrel by the downspout and the coal in the cellar bin and the Christmas Club passbook in the kitchen drawer and the deed on the dining room wall did not owe anyone anything. The grocery store did not own a piece of his week. The bank did not own a piece of his month. The utility company did not own a piece of his year. He was not rich. He was something better than rich. He was free in a way that almost nobody who is breathing in this country today gets to be free. Every single one of those quiet little tricks was a small piece of that freedom, and they were taken away from us one at a time, very quietly, while everybody was busy watching the television set he had soldered together himself in the cellar. He is gone now. Your grandfather. The little white house got sold for $17,000 after the funeral, and the new owners tore down the smokehouse and put in a hot tub. The chickens were gone long before that. The mason jar on the windowsill went to a flea market in 1993, but the tricks are still here. Pick one, just one. Try it this week. Put a barrel under the downspout the next time it rains. Plant a row of green beans against the south fence. Open a savings account at the smallest bank in your town and drop $10 in it every Friday. And come back to this video and tell me in the comments which one you tried first, and tell me, if you can, whether you think your grandfather would have smiled at you for it. Because somewhere in the back of every one of these old men sitting at every diner counter in every working town in this country, there is a story exactly like this one. And they were waiting their whole long lives for somebody to come along and ask,